People think the trouble started because of my roof. That's the story the HOA president wanted everyone to believe, that my dark charcoal cabin was disrupting the community's aesthetic harmony. But the truth was simpler and uglier. It was about money. A $7 million resort deal and the clean underground spring flowing right beneath my 12 acres of Colorado mountain land. I didn't know any of that the afternoon I finished nailing the last sheet of standing seam metal to the roof. No fanfare, no neighbors clapping. Just me, a cordless drill with a dying battery, and a wide Colorado sky so blue it hurt to look at. 12 acres of pine and rock, bought outright after the divorce papers were signed and the dust settled. The deed was in my name alone, clean, final, mine. After 25 years in a Denver suburb where every house looked like the next one and the HOA fined you for parking your boat in the driveway too long, I wanted something different. I wanted wind in the trees, silence that wasn't interrupted by leaf blowers, and the freedom to paint my mailbox whatever color I damn well pleased, or not have a mailbox at all. Up here, there were no covenants, no architectural review boards, no monthly dues. Just me, a small solar array I'd wired myself, a wood stove that kept the place toasty, and a view that stretched 20 miles on a clear day. I built the cabin with my own hands. Every log, every rafter, every stubborn knot I had to curse at before it would sit right. When I stepped back that afternoon and watched the late sun hit the dark metal roof, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Real, bone-deep peace. The nearest subdivision, Pine Ridge Estates, was down the slope, a good quarter-mile away, and separated by a rocky ridge. Their manicured lawns and identical mailboxes didn't reach me. Their rules didn't apply. Or so I thought. The first warning came in a cream-colored envelope weighted down by a pine cone on my fire pit stones. Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. Gold foil crest. The letter welcomed me as a neighboring property owner and politely suggested I consider updating my roof to a more natural shade, forest green or warm gray, to preserve the shared visual corridor. I read it twice, laughed once, and dropped it into the burn barrel. Ashes don't argue back. A week later, I heard the faint whine of a drone. Small, white, hovering just above the treetops, drifting closer until it was directly over the cabin. I waved at it like you wave off a persistent horsefly. It lingered a moment longer, then banked and disappeared down the ridge. That night, I slid my old Remington 870 behind the doorframe. Not loaded, just there. A reminder that peace is nice, but preparedness is better. Then she showed up. It was a crisp Saturday morning. I was carrying a crate of canned goods from the truck when I saw movement on the slope below. A woman in expensive hiking boots and a spotless Patagonia jacket climbing toward me with the confidence of someone who believed the land already belonged to her. Short auburn hair, sunglasses perched on her head, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Harlan," she called, voice bright and practiced. "Depends who's asking." She extended a hand I didn't take. "Marcia Whitaker, president of the Pine Ridge Estates HOA. I wanted to formally welcome you to the area." I wiped sweat from my neck. "Appreciate it." She glanced at the roof. "Your new roof is certainly striking. We've received several comments from residents about how it catches the light. The sun tends to do that." Her smile tightened. "We have a recommended palette book. I'd be happy to bring it by. Forest tones, earth tones, things that blend with the natural surroundings." "I'm good," I said. "My land, my roof." The smile flickered. She made a note on her clipboard, the way a teacher marks down a disruptive student. "Of course, we're always available if you'd like to discuss community alignment." She turned to leave, then paused at the edge of the clearing, pulled out her phone, and took 3 quick photos of the cabin. No apology, no hesitation. Just click, click, click. I watched her pick her way back down the slope and felt the first real prickle of unease. This wasn't about harmony. This was about control. 3 days later, another envelope appeared, slid under the door this time. Notice of potential noncompliance, unpermitted structure, and possible environmental concern. They were worried about my gray water system and compost pile. I ignored it. Then the inspectors started showing up. County trucks idling at the boundary line, asking about permits, runoff, even whether my solar panels might disrupt avian migration patterns. One wildlife officer actually asked if I had considered the impact on elk calving season. It was absurd, but the pattern was clear. Someone was building a paper trail. I ran into Charlie at the hardware store in town. Charlie had lived in these hills 40 years before Pine Ridge Estates was even a blueprint. He waved me over, voice low. "You hear about the resort deal?" I raised an eyebrow. "Big luxury spa thing. Hot springs, yoga retreats, the whole package. $7 million project. They've been trying to lock up water rights for 2 years. And he tapped a spot on the county map taped to the wall. "That spring under your ridge? Pure, reliable, right on the county line. The HOA filed for shared watershed access last year. County said no. It's on your deeded land." My stomach settled somewhere near my boots. "Word is," Charlie continued, "Marcia gets a finder's fee if the deal closes. 5%. That's a big check." I did the math in my head. $350,000. So all this, the letters, the drone, the inspectors, it's not about my roof. Charlie shook his head. "They need you gone before the developer walks away. Best way to force someone off land quick? Claim an environmental emergency." For days. That was the deadline Charlie had heard through the grapevine. The mountain felt different on the drive home. The next escalation came wearing a faded green jacket and a Conservation Alliance patch. "Morning. Name's Ryan. Volunteer with the Western Slope Watershed Guardians. Just checking on properties near the recharge zone." His eyes tracked my water tank, the drainage swale, the slope where snowmelt ran in spring. He asked polite questions while splitting firewood with me for half an hour. How deep was my well? Did the soil stay damp near the ridge? Did my gray water system tie into any natural drainage? I gave vague answers. He smiled and left. He came back the next day, and the day after. On the third evening, after he'd driven away, I found a small plastic bottle tucked behind the woodpile. Clear, no label, filled with a pale liquid that smelled faintly of motor oil. Exactly where runoff would carry it downslope toward the spring. I didn't touch it with bare hands. I photographed it in place, then used tongs and gloves to lift it, note its position, and set it back exactly as I'd found it. Then I strapped a trail camera to the pine directly above, lens aimed down. That night I sat on the porch with a lantern and understood. This wasn't pettiness anymore. This was a felony in the making. The next afternoon, I prepared my countermove. I created a thin folder of deliberately terrible forgeries, misspelled county forms, wrong coordinates, a fake permit application any clerk would spot in 10 seconds. I scuffed it, dirted it, bent the corner. Then I tucked a small GPS tracker into the spine and left the folder slightly open on my workbench, shed door ajar. Ryan returned at dusk. I watched from the cabin window as he slipped inside for 20 seconds and left with the folder tucked under his jacket. The GPS that blinked its way straight to the Pine Ridge Clubhouse. I checked the trail cam. It had caught him near the woodpile earlier that day, inspecting the bottle. Everything was in place. The next morning, a white Pine Ridge Estates SUV crawled up my road. They claimed my property posed an immediate chemical contamination threat to the watershed. They had authority to secure the area and begin demolition within 24 hours. I took the paper, folded it carefully, and slipped it into my pocket. "You boys realize impersonating county officials is a felony, right?" They stiffened. I set my phone on the porch rail and hit record. Before they could answer, tires crunched on gravel. Sheriff Danvers' cruiser rolled up, lights flashing. The sheriff climbed out, took one look at the document, and tore it in half. "Trash," he said flatly. He gave the 2 men 5 seconds to leave. They didn't argue. Marcia Whitaker arrived in her silver SUV just in time to watch her hired muscle drive away. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Mr. Harlan," she snapped. Sheriff Danvers turned to her. "Ma'am, you've got jurisdiction over your subdivision. Not his land, not the spring, and definitely not some emergency clause you invented." Marcia tried to argue. I cut in. "2 questions, Marcia. If you really believe there was hazardous material here, why didn't you call the county environmental division? And why did your volunteer Ryan bring the evidence to you instead of the sheriff?" She froze. The sheriff stepped closer. "I suggest you leave while this is still a civil matter." She stormed to her car, tires spitting gravel. "This isn't over," she hissed. But it was far from over. 2 days later, she escalated again. Pine Ridge Estates announced Watershed Unity Day, a family picnic and live-streamed event to protect our community's water. Marcia took the microphone in a pastel blazer and spoke about a reckless individual endangering our watershed with hazardous chemicals. Then she announced a symbolic walk along the boundary to show our commitment. I went live on my phone from the porch. 10 minutes later, a dozen HOA members marched up the slope carrying little blue and white flags. Ryan led the way, heading straight for the woodpile. I stood at the boundary marker. Folks, one more step and you're on private property. This is being live-streamed. Choose wisely. Marcia's voice crackled over their own stream. Keep walking. They crossed the line. Ryan stopped at the woodpile, gasped theatrically, and lifted the bottle. That's when I played the trail cam footage on my stream. Clear video of Ryan planting the bottle days earlier. The HOA chat erupted. Their own live stream turned to chaos. Within minutes, the footage was everywhere. The courthouse hearing was swift. My attorney presented the videos. Marcia ordering trespass, Ryan planting evidence, the forged documents, bank records showing consulting payments from the resort developer. Ryan cracked on the stand. She told me to do it. Said it was the only way to get the emergency declaration. The judge didn't hesitate. Effective immediately, Pine Ridge Estates HOA was dissolved. All board authority revoked. Marcia Whitaker and Ryan Ellis taken into custody pending charges of fraud, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. The resort developer issued a terse statement. No relationship with Marcia Whitaker, project suspended indefinitely. 6 months later, the mountain was quiet again. I built a small outbuilding down the slope, called it the Freedom Shed. Painted the roof forest green just because I could. Word spread. People started asking how I'd done it. A retired couple from Albuquerque who'd been fined for planting tomatoes. A veteran in Nevada fighting a $10,000 fine for an unapproved flagpole. I started holding small workshops by the fire pit. How to read plats, document harassment, set legal boundaries, use public records. My attorney taught the statutes. I taught the practical side. We called it standing ground. Marcia's house sold at auction. New owners moved in. Quiet folks who waved when they saw me. One evening, I walked into the cabin bathroom and looked at the wall. There, framed behind glass, was one of the little blue and white Unity Day flags that had been carried across my property line. I smiled. Freedom looks better when you fought for it. That's my story. Now I'd like to hear yours. Have you ever dealt with an overreaching HOA, a nosy neighbor, or someone trying to bully you off your own land? What did you do? Do you think people should fight back the way I did? Or is there a line where confrontation becomes too dangerous? Drop your thoughts in the comments, especially about where the line should be between standing up for yourself and crossing into something uglier. I'd genuinely like to read your perspective. Thanks for listening all the way through. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who might need to hear it.